Hello everyone. Welcome today to the Geographic webinar for the month of November. Currently, all attendees are in listen-only mode. You should be able to see the first slide on your screen. My name's Heather Poirier, Marketing Manager for Blue Marble Geographics, and I'm here today with Sam Knight, Director of Product Management.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
So we're going to do something a little different today.
That's right. Today we are going to be doing part one of a two-part series. These parts of our webinars for November are actually going to span the two different products. So for those of you who are currently working in both Geographic Calculator and Global Mapper, the way this is going to work is we typically do a Global Mapper session and a Geographic Calculator session once each during a month. And this month what we're actually going to be doing is tying them together. So today's Geographic Calculator session is going to directly feed into the next session of the Global Mapper webinar, and we're going to see how the interrelated tools can be used in each version of the application. So in Geographic Calculator today, what we're going to be focusing on are what we call the GeoCalc tools, which are the geodetic engine inside the Geographic Calculator. In our latest releases of the Geographic Calculator 2013 and Global Mapper version 15, we have some cross-pollination there. So specifically in the add-on module for Global Mapper called Global Energy Mapper, we can tie directly into the GeoCalc data source and take advantage of all of the administrative type tools that we're going to see today. So in today's session, what we're going to be focusing on is purely those tools in the Geographic Calculator. And for those of you who are only Geographic Calculator users, this can be a standalone webinar. For those of you who have access to Global Mapper as well, you can use this to add on in the next session that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. So today what we're going to be talking about are primarily the geodetic data source and the underlying administrative tools that allow you to control how your end users interact with that data source for all of the various types of conversions that we can do. So this is going to apply for anybody throughout the Geographic Calculator. The interfaces we're going to be looking at today are primarily going to be under the options menu, the administrative settings panel, and we're going to see a little bit of how that actually applies just simply using an interactive conversions job. And again, in 2 weeks, we're going to be coming back for part 2, which is going to see how all of these tools show up over in Global Energy Mapper. So that's going to be pretty much how we go today. Let's see here. Heather, you want to talk about questions?
Sure. If you have any questions during the presentation today, you can use the GoToWebinar toolbar to the right of your screen. We have professionals standing by to answer your questions as they come in, and Sam and I will save some time at the end to answer any outstanding questions.
Okay, and also after the session, if you have questions once you get working with the software, you can always contact our tech support at geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com. The address is right there at the bottom of the screen. So Heather, we've also got some upcoming events we want to talk about.
Yeah, we're really excited to be in Amsterdam on November 11th at the SPAR Europe conference. We've got an exhibit set up, and our people are going to be there demonstrating our software and taking feedback, and we'd love to see you. We've also got an exciting event that we're a part of. It's the first APSG East Coast chapter meeting. That'll be held on November 15th, and that's in Pennsylvania.
Okay, and for those of you who are not familiar with the APSG, that is the Association of Petroleum Surveying and Geomatics. This is an international group. It has been based out of Houston, Texas for a number of years now. It's been growing into additional regional subchapters. The East Coast chapter is newly formed. There's been a few interest meetings and things like that, more of an informal nature to try and get the information out there. And this is actually going to be the first inaugural real meeting of this chapter. So there's going to be some good, interesting talks. If you're going to be in the Canonsburg, Pennsylvania area in the next couple of weeks, definitely check that out. There's more information available on our events page, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there. So we're going to get started now, and what we're going to do is start off with a poll just to see who's with us today. So in just a moment, you're going to see a poll coming up on screen asking you about which versions of our software you are currently using. So if you wouldn't mind just clicking on screen there, the options are that you are only a Geographic Calculator user, only a Global Mapper user, or if you're currently a user of both softwares. So the returns are coming in pretty well here. Looks like we've got a heavy contingent on the Global Mapper side, and Calculator's starting to catch up there. I'm going to leave it open for just another second before I close that off, and I'm going to close it off right now. Okay. Interesting results there. Looks like we have a lot of Global Mapper users, only Global Mapper users. So good to see some new folks here on the Calculator side. Those of you who are already using Calculator in conjunction with the Global Mapper are going to have an easy time understanding both of these. For those of you who are purely Geographic Calculator users, again, today's session can be standalone for you as well, or you can extend this into the next session if you want to see how this takes place over in the Global Mapper software. So we're going to actually get started here with the calculator. I'm just going to hop right into it. So for those of you who are just Global Mapper users, I'm going to just take a very brief look here at the general layout of the tools so we know what we're looking at. The interface we have up right now is the interactive conversions job. This is really the simplest place we can do work in the Geographic Calculator. It is aimed around numeric data conversion, and on screen you'll see a simple calculation that I've got set up here, going from the NAD27 geodetic coordinate system to the NAD83 geodetic coordinate system. So we have one numeric point, and this is a simple latitude longitude value. And we're going to convert that out to one other point. Now, the power of the tools that we're going to be taking a look at here in the admin tools relates to how users interact with those coordinate systems. So specifically, we're going to have an input coordinate system, we're going to have an output coordinate system, and the box in the center is where we select our coordinate transformation. For those of you who have worked in Global Mapper for years, you're probably familiar with selecting a datum. When you select a datum, that automatically comes with a transformation to WGS84. And for those of you who have been with us for a very long time in the calculator, you'll remember the days in which that was true in the calculator as well. For the last many years now, though, we have been in this what's called a late binding model. That's basically a technical term that just means the coordinate transformation is a separate selection from the horizontal datum transformation, or from the horizontal datum itself. So we dynamically select the best coordinate transformation for the combination of input and output systems. Now, we have a number of different types of jobs that we can apply to various data processes. Everything from interactive points, single points at a time, point database conversions that we see here, things like tables and spreadsheets. We have specialty handlers for seismic survey data, vector data jobs, raster data, and a number of very specialty conversions. I'm primarily just going to focus on the interactive conversions here today, just so we don't complicate it with more complicated data types, because what we're really interested in is just the coordinate data itself today. So to actually do things like select a coordinate system, for those of you who are new to the calculator, if I wanted to select the input coordinate system over here of NAD27, I just simply double-click on the system box, and it's going to offer us a chance to either select our coordinate system by interacting with a map or just going straight into the whole library. I'm going to skip the map for now. We're going to come back to a map a little bit later. For now, I'm just going to bring up the main dialog here. And a little bigger so we can see more stuff on screen. So this is a standard dialog that we have all throughout the Geographic calculator in both the 32-bit and 64-bit versions of the application. And as well, for those of you who are going to be taking advantage of this over in Global Energy Mapper, this is now also going to be present in Global Energy Mapper as the dialog you select your coordinate systems from if you turn on GeoCalc mode. So whenever we go to select that, you're going to be seeing a similar dialog here for both the horizontal systems, the datums, the units, all of those different types of parameters. The way this works is there are two databases that live inside the software. The first is the main data source that we ship with the application out of the box, and the second is the custom data source where all of your user-defined or shared proprietary parameters are going to be stored. Those are two data files separate from each other, essentially to facilitate the upgrade process and also to allow them to be easily shared with other users across your enterprise. So the custom XML file is yours. It stays right in place on your machine. As you upgrade from version to version, the custom definitions that you've entered are just simply going to stay there, whereas the main data source file is going to be periodically revised and updated as new coordinate systems are published for different parts of the planet. So I mentioned the out-of-the-box data source there as Geodetic XML. Within this data source, there are over 5,000 different coordinate systems, and that can be a daunting thing to choose from for the average user at some point. Now, today what we're going to be talking about is how we actually control and filter some of the selections that an administrative level user can apply so that they can streamline it, they can guide users into making the appropriate decisions for which coordinate systems, which transformations to use through the use of a number of different types of filters, both spatial filters where we can limit availability of certain things by the geography of the data itself, or just simply arbitrary off and on filters that hide some of the things in the data source. So we're going to be taking a look at all of these various settings. Now within those two data source files, both the stock source and the custom source, they're actually stored right in line with each other. So as we navigate through the folder tree in the left-hand panel, we're going to be navigating down through some main categories here like fitted engineering systems, geocentric coordinate systems, which are Earth-centered, Earth-fixed, or 3D Cartesian, as some of you might know them as. Geodetic systems are going to be our latitudes and longitudes, and projected systems are all of our flattened, projected, and slightly distorted map views of different parts of the planet. So all told, there's about 5,000, it's actually over 5,000 now, different coordinate systems to choose from. First, we organize them by type of coordinate system. So I'm going to take a look down under Geodetic here, and beneath that we then organize them essentially geopolitically. So for the most part you'll notice continent level organizations, Africa, Antarctica, Asia, and so on, and you'll see a couple specialty categories, things like HTDP, which is horizontal time-dependent positioning specifically for North America. So you'll see a few specialty categories, but it is mostly geopolitical in its organization. So if I'm looking for NAD27, that is a continent-wide coordinate system. I'm going to click down on the North America level, and we'll see NAD83, NAD27, and Ocotepeque 1935, which is a regional datum used farther south than we're going to be working today. This is a system that's a regional system down in Central America. If we take a look at any of those subfolders, so specifically if I click on the United States, we'll see realizations of particular datums that are within that smaller boundary. So not necessarily a continent-wide system, but only those that apply to the US or Canada or any of the other subregions that we have within a particular part of the world. So the same level of organization is going to be found in both the geodetic folder, the projected folder, the geocentric folder. All of those apply. Now, as we actually get down to looking at a particular definition that we're interested in, we can right-click on any of those and click View Info, or there's also an Info button off on the right of the screen there. And on the information panels for all of these, you'll see a full definition of what makes that particular set of parameters a particular object in the data source. So you'll see things like envelopes, which is an area of use for that particular definition, where on the world it applies. You'll see things like point style, which is units and formatting. You'll see the datum, which is the horizontal datum. You may see a vertical reference. And in the case of projected systems, you'll see more parameters. A lat-long system is fairly simple. A projected system, you'll see things like a projection method and other terms like central meridian, scale factors, and so on. You'll also have an identification tab, and this identification tab allows you to see remarks on particular definitions. In this case, we don't have any remarks for this entity, but we do have a number of identifiers, and the identifiers actually help us cross-reference this particular definition with the same definition in either other databases, such as the EPSG database, or other software. So we'll see everything here from CS codes to ER Mapper to the long list of SRIDs at the bottom are all for Oracle spatial databases. So we can find the same definition in a number of different places. All of these dialogues we're taking a quick look at here. We're going to be using these same dialogues for those of you following us to the next session on Global Mapper. So for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and select NAD27, come back to my main interface, and I'm going to get on with this conversion. So I've entered in a coordinate point, so 70 degrees west longitude, 44 degrees north latitude, based on NAD27. I'm going to be transforming that to NAD83. I just selected NAD83 here as a predefined in my job. So I selected that the same way, just double-clicking on the system box and getting into the database. Now, to establish a relationship between those two, I need to select a coordinate transformation. And the coordinate transformation really is the defining thing that is going to control the accuracy of the point as it's transformed from its source system to its target system. So to activate this, it's just like picking a system. I'm going to double-click on that box in the middle. And when I do, we're going to see a similar dialog is going to pop up. And this is going to have a short list of ways to transform this particular coordinate from one system to another. In this example, you'll see I've only got 4 different ways to make that transformation. I have a NAD27 to NAD83 entry right at the top there. It says it is in the envelope of the United States. A couple of acronyms here. The continental U.S. is a common acronym there, CONUS, including EEZ. That just is simply an international boundary term, means exclusive economic zone. That is the name of that envelope as it appears in the EPSG database. Now, if I want to see what is actually going on in this transformation, I can right-click on it and say View Transformation. And this is going to open up all those same style parameter dialogues that we looked at with the coordinate system. So I can see exactly what's going on in this definition. I can go to its identification tab, get the remarks, see things like its accuracy in meters, which so 15 centimeters of accuracy for this particular transformation. I can compare that and sort it by accuracy with some of the other options that are available. The second, third, and fourth option here are going to be combinations of different transformations that will get me from my initial coordinate system to my output coordinate system. The general idea here is we want to find the transformation that is the most accurate for the area that we're actually working in. So in this case, I've got a pretty obvious choice here that I would want to select that first return. When we do that, we go back to the main interface, and we're ready to finish off our calculation here. So all I have to do is hit Calculate at the bottom, and there's our output point. Now, what we've done in here is actually taken advantage of some of the admin tools already. So there are admin tools that are applied out of the box. This is true of any geographic calculator installation and any global energy mapper installation that is using the GeoCalc transformation mode. And so this is what we're really going to be talking about. It's what happens when we go to select that coordinate transformation and when we go to select that coordinate system. We just had a pretty easy choice. So what we're going to do now is take a look at all of the other choices that are available and how we can control some of those decisions even a little bit more. So primarily where we're going to be taking a look is under the options menu. Up at the top there we'll see this group of settings called the administrative settings. So we're going to open that panel up, and this is essentially the control panel for all of those restrictive and guiding settings that an administrator can apply to filter both of the libraries that you'll see, the custom library as well as the stock library in Calculator as well as over in Global Mapper through the GeoCalc mode. So there are two main groups of settings in the administrative panel. There's the filtering setting, we're going to be taking a look at this first, and then there is the administrative panel where we can apply various locks and restrictions if we really want to tie this down. So on the filtering settings, this is where we can narrow down some of the out-of-the-box definitions. So we can hide certain things from our users to essentially steer them into the choices that we want them to be making. We're going to take a look at two different ways to do this. We're actually going to be doing this spatially via envelopes, and we're going to take a look at what we simply call our view settings, which are off or on display filters for parameters in the database. I'm going to start out by going to the off or on parameters because it's a little simpler than starting off with the envelopes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click Set Data Source View Filters, and this is going to pop open a slightly more complicated view of our data source. You'll notice in the tree view on the left there are all of the different types of geodetic parameters over here. So we have everything from angular units to vertical references. All of that stuff applies. Just as a simple example of this, I'm going to take a look under angular units. So you'll notice out of the box we have about a dozen different types of ways to specify angles. Now most folks only work with degrees, and even it's probably our most common other unit, but grads and radians are also in there as well. So of these dozen different types of units, there's really only about 2 or 3 that actually get used in most people's work. We've got some more esoteric things like centesimal minutes, centesimal seconds, milli-arc seconds, and so on. In order to just simplify the end user's experience with the application, what some folks will do is they'll want to hide some of these. You don't necessarily want to take them out of the database, and you're actually prevented from doing that. In the stock data source, this Geodata XML file, you can't actually delete anything. It's a protected source. But what we can do is hide some of them. So what I can do here as a quick example is I'm going to just simply shut them all off, and I'm going to toggle on just degrees, grads, and radians. So when I go to actually work in the software, I'm only going to see these 3 particular definitions there. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to save this into what's called my view file, which is a file that accompanies the installation, and it tells you what restrictions are in place on the data source itself. So the main data source has everything, and the view file controls your interaction with that. So I'm just going to say OK. I'm going to close all the way out of the admin settings, and I'm going to come back to one of my coordinate system controls here. So we'll see NAD 27. This is a geodetic coordinate system. I can pick some units for that system. So I'm going to double click on my units, and when that comes up, we're going to see that I've only got a filtered list of degrees, grads, and radians. I don't have any of those other dozen and so on coordinate systems. So very simple type of filter. It's just simply on or off. We can apply that to any type of definition in the data source. So in those views and filters again, you'll see we have angular units, coordinate systems, transformations, all of these different types of parameters. We can simply shut off what we don't want our users to have access to at all. We can do this on a larger scale under some of the categories here that have subfolders, things like geodetic coordinate systems. The example I always go back to for this is a company that was the very first company that interacted with us after we put in the admin tools. They were looking for some help in setting these up. It was actually a Canadian company, and they worked primarily in the area of Alberta. So they had no use, or their users had no use for coordinate systems from, say, Africa or Antarctica in any of their work. And so to streamline their interface, what they wanted to do was actually just hide everything that was outside of the area that they were working in. So there are a couple other ways we can hide things. If you click on particular folders, you'll see all of the individual checkboxes there for whether or not a particular system is shown or hidden. But we can actually also do global level hides by just right-clicking on a folder itself and saying Hide Folder. Now, when we right-click on a folder and hide the entire folder, you'll see the text of that folder changes to italicized text, and then any of the parameters or the definitions that are found within that folder, you'll also see their text go to italics, meaning that it is being hidden by the folder rather than the individual show or hide settings. So as we hide various folders in there, we can simply regionally filter these out. So I can hide, say, Africa and Antarctica. As we save those into our view, the same things will apply for selecting coordinate systems. When I go to pick a geodetic coordinate system now, you'll notice that I've only actually got access to those that are hidden. You'll notice I start with Asia there now instead of Antarctica and Africa. So, whoops, back out one there. In the views and filters, again, those can be applied to any type of definition in this, within the database. So those are just simply on or off filters. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at spatial filters. And so these are the custom envelopes. So in the custom envelopes, this was the dialog I accidentally just clicked into a moment ago. This is a map-based interface, and you'll see the red polygons in the background there. Those are national boundaries between countries, and some countries like the U.S. and Canada that have many subdivisions that are commonly used will also have some of those subdivisions in there as well. So the red polygon map in the background is our base map that simply installs with the application. The black polygons that are superimposed on that, you'll see there's three major ones around North America here. There's a collection around Europe and so on. All of those are installed with the default workspace, and these are all customizable. Out of the box, we do include these envelopes, and we actually do apply some filtering in the data source using these envelopes. Some of them are simply placeholders. You can fill those out as you so choose. You can remove any of these that you don't have use for, and you can add in as many of your own as you need. What these areas of use are going to define for us is spatialized filters. So we're going to say within the area of a particular region on the map, we're going to apply some special filtering. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to zoom in to this area of North America, and we're going to take a look at one of our filters that is actually included out of the box. So I'm going to grab my envelope selection tool here. I'm just going to click inside the envelope surrounding the continental U.S., and it's going to pop up the envelope properties for that particular shape. So this is one that's out of the box. In just a second, we'll come back and take a look at adding your own in here. We can name those envelopes. So if I wanted to just give that a simple name for reference, I might name this one CONUS for continental U.S. If you have overlapping polygons, so if you've digitized your own polygons on top of this map, you can assign a priority level that will allow one envelope to trump another in order of the filters that are applied to that. That is particularly helpful if you have overlapping border areas. And a common case of this is an overlapping border between national boundaries such as the U.S. and Canada, where there are national transformations that you might want to have override each other, depending on which side of the boundary you're on. The envelope filters themselves actually goes back to the same style dialog as we were just working in. Specifically, we only apply the spatial filters to coordinate systems, datum transformations, and horizontal datums. What we're going to take a look at here are some out-of-the-box filters that we have on datum transformations. In this dialog, there are actually some various other things we can do, and I'm just going to use some of these uncategorized coordinate transformations as an example of this. You actually also have full control over the foldering of these. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. So we're going to be moving these around in just a minute. That's why they're up at my top level. What I'm going to do first is I'm just simply going to use the search field at the bottom to search out all the transformations for NAD27. And when I get that list back, you'll see there are probably 60 or 70 different ways we can make that transformation. You'll also notice we've got the same show and hide column that we saw on the non-spatial filters. In this case, this is one of those envelopes that we actually do predefine out of the box with some extra filtering. This is a very, very common one that a lot of folks will have in place. So of all of the ways to get between NAD27 and NAD83 or other datums such as WGS84, we have many of these that apply to different regions throughout North America. If you're on the Canadian side of the border, there are a number of those. If you're down in Central America, out in the Caribbean, there are a number of those. But there are actually several sets of transformations that apply to the continental U.S. You'll see one down here that says USA CONUS onshore. You'll see east of the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi. So we actually do have a number of ways to make that same transformation. If we scroll over a little bit in that list and take a look at the accuracies, you'll notice that some of these accuracies are very, very variable. So there are the one that we've got at the top there, 15 centimeters. You'll see some half meter, meter and a half, all the way out to 44 meters. Some of these transformations are very, very loose, and some of them are actually even unrated. So of all of these different ways that we have for the different regions, some of these we might simply determine are not fit for your typical purposes. Within the U.S., for survey standards, it actually mandates that we have to use this particular one at the top. If we open up its information, we can see that this uses a lookup table-based method called the NADCON method. Here in the U.S., that's our official survey standard. On the other side of the border, north in Canada, they have other transformations that are equally as accurate, but also their local survey standard. So this filter that we're looking at here for the U.S. national standard, again, only applies within the area of that envelope that we're looking at on screen in the background. So here, of all of these different ways, anytime we enter data, such as the coordinate we started off with, so that 44 degrees north, 70 degrees west longitude, we're falling within the envelope that we've described here, and we're going to apply this filtering to any of those objects that are inside that area. So in this case, we're just going to return that one for going to NAD83. And if I go all the way to the other end of the list, we'll see some others that are also within that region, such as Ocotepeque. And another one for going to WGS84. So with those filters in place, that's how we get such a short list for areas that might actually have multiple transformations. Now, those are just simply an example of our out-of-the-box transformations. But let's say, for example, we wanted to add in a custom transformation. We can do that very, very simply by grabbing onto the Draw tool, which is right next to the Selection tool there. So it looks like a little polygon up in the upper left corner. And I'm just actually, before I draw, I'm just simply going to move myself into a more localized area. We'll say, let's say we're going to apply a datum transformation filter to some of the islands down here in Caribbean, such as Haiti. So let's say we wanted to draw an envelope around Haiti. All we have to do is grab onto our polygon draw tool, and we're just simply going to digitize a boundary around that area where we want our filter to apply. I'm going to double click to close that polygon, and it's just that simple. So it's going to add that into our workspace. We can name it. We can set up the filters just as we can interact with on the global overview map. All of those filters are going to be saved right into the workspace. And so as we interact with our data by simply loading data into any of the existing jobs in the project manager, or if we're over in Global Mapper, the same thing, adding data to an existing mapping project, these filters are going to be applied completely seamlessly to the end user. So if you're an administrative level user and you're trying to help folks streamline their work, these two methods of filtering, both the spatial filters with the custom envelopes, as well as the simple on or off view filters, can really streamline that interaction. Now, if you've gotten yourself into a state where things have sort of gone a little bit wonky maybe, and we need to go back to the defaults, we do have a button that allows you to restore a backup of the filters that you had in place. That's simply load default view, and that can undo sometimes maybe you got too many filters stacked up or whatever the cause in there and you need to go back to the defaults. You can do that at any time. Now the rest of the admin tools are how we apply those filters and what level of access the end user has to control some of these things. Before we get too much farther, I see that we've got some questions coming in. Heather, do we have any questions that we want to take a look at this point?
Yeah, we have a question about the custom envelopes. The question is it possible to import envelopes from a vector file to create custom envelopes?
Yes, that's a great question. I should have mentioned that. In the custom envelopes panel, I simply showed drawing an envelope on the screen. You can hand draw as many as you want. However, if you are, say, working in another tool, if you're working over in Global Mapper, and you actually want to get a little more complicated with some of those envelopes, you can load in envelopes via a saved vector file. Pretty much whatever kind of vector file you want. There's about 20 some odd vector formats that are supported here in the calculator. Simple things like shape files or CAD drawings, KML, GML, a number of types of vector data. What you need to save in those is simply polygons. The attributes don't matter at all. So all we need are some polygon outlines of a particular area. And to add those into the map, it's actually how we added in our basic out-of-the-box filters here. But what we do is go up to the File menu, and you'll see there are some options there, Save, Close. This bottom option is Import Polygon Data. And when you import that polygon data, it's just going to point you to select either a file, so you can browse to any of the types of vector data that we can load in. It's going to look only for polygons. It does have to be a closed polygon shape in order for it to work. As well, you can also bring that in from any of the spatial database types. So if you have I know some larger organizations actually have geodatabases that are storing areas of work in the company, so places around the world where you have operations. You can directly import vector data to drop it on top of the map. When you do that, it will offer you a chance to either merge in your new polygons with the existing ones, or it will actually let you wipe out all of the existing ones and start clean. So it's just going to be a simple prompt, and what happens after that is you'll see all of your polygons simply added to this map, and you can then interact with them individually to set up those filters and priority levels and all of that. The names and priority levels can actually be imported if you do want to set some of those attributes up in another software before coming over here to import them. All of the nuance of that is covered in the documentation. And if you have any particular questions, if you're going to be taking this to the level where you're going to be actually importing any of the spatial envelopes, it probably wouldn't hurt to get in touch with our tech support team. We have some pretty good insight in how to best streamline these things and set them up on that sort of mass production level. So to keep going here with some of the other administrative settings, we have some various options about controlling whether or not certain filters are used. So there are a couple options that control upgrades. So you'll see an option to hide any new parameters on a data source upgrade. What that will do is simply automatically hide anything that is not explicitly covered in the view file that you've been setting up. So if you're rolling forward on your installation of Geographic Calculator, but you are at the level of user where you want to make sure that you are consistently hiding things that are not explicitly approved, you may want to toggle that on. The setting beneath that is a setting to show deprecated data source objects. And what this actually is a special tag that is applied to coordinate systems or units or any object definition that is no longer fit for use. So these are kept in the database. So these can be things from a simple mistake on a set of parameters that was maybe stored in the EPSG database. Something was found to be erroneous with this definition over the years. By default, we hide those from view. So if we take a look in the data source views and filters, I'll just take a look down under coordinate systems here, and you'll see that we have this hidden category by default. There are a number of coordinate systems in here, and I'll just grab one of these at random and pop open its information. So this one I grabbed onto happens to be an Estonian coordinate system from years ago, and you'll notice that there is this little deprecated tag that is set at the bottom of the definition. So this was deprecated by the EPSG at some point back in 2004, meaning they found some parameter that was not fit for use, might have been a bad ellipsoid or something to that effect. I don't know why this one in particular was deprecated, but this has been determined to be not fit for everyday use. So the reason you want to keep this around is so that if you have work that has been done using those bad definitions, in some cases things like projections or a units conversion, you can actually turn those on and undo the bad conversion. It's a more rare case, so that's why we hide these out of the box. You'll see we store them all in an outdated folders. You'll see those outdated folders under all the major categories, but that's what the deprecated data source objects are all about. So objects that are no longer determined to be valid. Again, those are all hidden by default. Under envelope use, you'll see there are various ignore settings here. So we have all this great help applied out of the box to things like coordinate transformations, the horizontal datums, and things like that. If you are a power user, or if you're working in an area where there's not a lot of good parameters available, so typically if you are that highly experienced admin level user, and you know, for example, that you need to turn off that envelope filtering, you can do that simply by toggling on these settings. And you'll notice that we actually have one that we ignore out of the box, and that is our coordinate system filtering. So the data source coordinate systems, of the 5,000 systems that we include out of the box, we actually ignore the envelopes as we're selecting our output systems. We've found that many users do actually need to use a projection definition outside of the area where it is found, such as UTM is probably the best common example of this. Many folks need to span UTM zones with a project along the border, just as a really basic example. We've found that the envelopes that are defined by the EPSG database for some of those systems are a little bit overly tight compared to what folks actually do with them. So out of the box, we have that on to ignore the envelope for coordinate system selection. If we toggle that off when we define our input data, and then go to define our output coordinate system, we'll actually see narrowed down listings of the output systems that are available based on the input data. It's a very powerful setting if you are an admin user that can properly streamline that for use in your own enterprise. It can really, really simplify that coordinate system selection process. Most of the rest of these are going to be on by default simply because they are very useful in terms of narrowing down what can be very, very too many choices for inexperienced users. Can just provide a lot of noise on screen. There's not really any good reason to not have those filters in place. Many of them simply help us just weed out the chaff. For example, for the point data that I've entered on our conversion here, it's a point located nearby to where we are here in Maine. So this point, I would have no reason to want to see any transformations for the area of Alaska, for example. They just don't apply. So that's why we have all of these on out of the box, and you want to make sure that those are on to actually be able to take advantage of those filtering settings. Now over on the administrative panel, this is where we actually control the user access to all of these settings. So we have the ability to apply a password to the workspace and lock that down. The workspace file in Calculator is where all of these settings are going to be stored. If you are working over in Global Energy Mapper, we're going to see in a couple of weeks how there's interaction here between Global Mapper and the calculator. If you are only working in the calculator, it's all going to be stored right in this workspace that you load when the application starts. So my workspace here is just simply my common example workspace that I've named Roadshow. You'll see that title up in the bar there. This is a workspace I've created just to show all of the various types of data conversions we can take a look at. This automatically starts when my application, the workspace automatically starts when I launch the Geographic calculator, and I actually have the ability to lock that. So I can make it, using our lock settings, I can make it so that I'm not actually able to load any other workspace aside from that default workspace. There are various parameters in here, things like locking the location of the data source. Since we can have our custom data as well as our main data source, those could be put in any location. Some folks move them out to a shared network location to interact with other users, and other folks simply move them to alternate locations on your local machine. So we have various settings about locking levels of editing permissions, where those files are stored, and so on. Now down at the bottom, there are some particular settings here about particular types of objects that are allowed to be controlled, whether or not we're allowing overwrite for spatial database connections, whether or not your users are allowed to see a null coordinate transformation, meaning they're allowed to apply essentially a zero shift to a combination of data to get from one to another that might not have a good way to get there, and a number of just little tweaky settings about fine-tuning the end user's control over things like the workspace and the data source, etc. The validation of signatures, I'll just mention this one real quick here before we move over to some questions. The validation of data source when the application is loaded applies to users that may try to manually change the database of coordinate systems. So our database is simply XML based. You can launch it in a text editor. You can read it. It is quite easily readable for somebody who's familiar with geodetic parameters. And because of that, you can actually try to hand edit it. When users try to do any circumvention of any of the built-in lock settings, there is a digital signature that is applied to all of these various components, things like the workspace file, things like the data source itself. These settings to validate the data source when the application is loaded essentially prevents that. So it locks down the locks, if you will. It stops an end user from trying to go around any of the restrictions that are in place. So the whole administrative panel is going to be used for applying that, and the teeth of this are set as a password on the workspace, where if you are the administrator, you simply set the password. You can push out your workspace to your end users, and then those folks must work within your restrictions, unless, of course, they are given the admin password to log in and change any of these permission level settings. Okay, so that's pretty much going to do it for the main parts of the calculator topics that we're going to be dealing with today. Again, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a global mapper side of this. David McKittrick will be leading that. He's one of our senior application specialists here. I'll be joining him for a few minutes just to talk very briefly about what we talked about today and warm up that connection in between the two applications. So if you are a global mapper user, definitely check out our session in a couple of weeks, and we will see the other side of the coin here for actually applying these in the context of a GIS. Just going to bring back our last slide here before we get into questions. If you do have questions after we close down the session, please feel free to email our tech support group at geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com, and we'll follow up with any additional questions that come in after the fact. And we'll do our best to get to those. Okay, so Heather, do we have any questions to take a look at here?
Yeah, we have a question regarding licensing. Is there any special licensing needed to use the administration tools?
Good question. There is no special license that needed to use the admin tools. There is just simply let me put this in the context for the global mapper users. If you are going to be using both of these together, essentially what you need is simply a license for the calculator that has one component, so it's all inclusive on the calculator side. If you're going to be working with this in Global Mapper, obviously you're also going to need a Global Mapper license on that. If you are only a calculator user, then there is no other specialty license needed. The admin tools are included with the basic functionality of the application. So it depends on how much you need to be working with here, but in the calculator it's all inclusive. If you're going to be extending this over into Global Mapper, that would be the only additional license that you would need to take a look at.
Okay, we have one more question. The person wants to know, where did all the jobs come from in your workspace?
Okay, so anybody that's a calculator user might be noticing that I have a few extra things over here in my project manager specifically. These are this is simply my own workspace. This is a workspace that we commonly use here at Blue Marble, just as a showcase of predefined settings. So the workspace itself starts off with the basic out-of-the-box settings. So you'll see our placeholder jobs up here for all of the different types of data that we interact with. So these are just examples that we've saved with pre-existing settings. I have some additional folders here, and these are all things that I've simply set up in order to be able to quickly demonstrate. How you might be able to apply that is in common settings that you work with all the time. Certain conversions, particular groups of coordinate system settings, time-dependent shifts. If there are any particular coordinate settings or there are any particular job types that you work with a lot, you don't have to just stay within those 8 placeholders at the beginning. This is a fully customizable list out here on the project manager. So this is just that I've over time built this workspace up. I've saved all of these individual jobs. We can name them by simply right-clicking on any of them and saying rename. We can copy them, etc. So that's something you have direct access to in your version of the calculator, that you basically set it up as you see fit. If you would like to move any of those settings, so say for example you're going to take advantage of some of those, predefining your own workspace with particular calculators that you use all the time, what you might do is export those out. And this is actually going to be true as well for those of you who are hoping to share some administrative settings that we've taken a look at. All of those are stored in the workspace file itself. So under the File menu, what you'll do is come down to Export Workspace. That will package up all of the settings files that define a workspace, so all of the individual files defining the projects, the jobs, and all of the surrounding settings like admin settings, the locations of your data sources, things like that. That's going to pack all of that up into a single zip file. You can simply take that to another machine, import it, and then you will see all of your predefined settings and all of your admin tools in place as you work on that secondary machine. Do we have any additional questions that have come in?
No, I think that just about does it, but I do want to add that we will have the webinar up on our website and our YouTube page in a couple days or so for you to watch again. And if you have any questions, again, you can email us at geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com.
Great. Okay. So yeah, we are recording the session. We'll have this posted on the website as soon as we can. Also, if you want to use it as a refresher before the next session, just as a reminder, that next session is November 21st. So 2 weeks from today, same time, and that will be applying the admin settings that we've taken a look at today, but also getting further into actually the use of some of the more specific conversions, things like vertical datum transformations, using the datum transformation pickers, getting into a little more detail about how all of this is going to work in Global Mapper, specifically within the Global Energy Mapper module version. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.